Hi everyone, welcome to the class. So, till now we have completed a lot of units of the subject B2B marketing, where we discussed about several factors like how segmentation is done, what is the industrial or the B2B buying behavior, how the 4 P's of marketing, the product, place, price, promotion is to be understood in terms of the B2B. So, how what are the characteristics of the B2B market, and what kind of strategies are to be adopted in this market, which makes it different from the B2C market, right? But all said and done, everything is fine till you find success, right? And to achieve success, a strategy is very important. The right strategy is very important. And how do you implement this strategy? And how do you control this strategy? Whether it is right or wrong, how do you check it? So, today we will be discussing about this issue, and let's start with a small example. What went wrong, right? A company which is a manufacturer of industrial robots, right? So, it is a leading manufacturer and they are selling a new line of industrial product now, which is again a robot only. So, a new kind of a robot, right, which has some more extensive usages. Now, this no, it has priced this new product on the basis of the value it is providing to its customers. So, price wise it has used the perceived value of the customers and all. The sales representatives were earning an average of more than $50,000 a year, which is considered to be a good sum in the market and much more than what the competitors were paying. The incentive on the older machines is higher than the new ones. Now, the 50% team, the sales team force had forecasted that they would be able to sell 500 units of the product, right? But what happened is, in reality, they could sell only 39 units. Now, what is the problem? What happened? What went wrong? So, it is a good company, has used a good strategy. The pricing was good, the policy was good, they are paying their employees well. So, what went wrong, right? Was it a problem with strategy or was it a problem with the implementation? Now, think about it. So, what we are trying to say here is, it is not the strategy which was at mistake, it was the implementation, right? Because the sales representatives were already earning a very good, a decent amount of money, right? And they had little incentive to struggle with a new product. So, there was nothing they were not interested, because the new product was anyway not going to give them more, since there was the incentives were so higher on the older machines, and the new machines they were getting lesser incentives. On top of that, they had to learn about the new machinery to explain to the customers and all. So, all these things made unnecessarily more challenging, and task was difficult for them. So, they were not interested, right. So, this was a implementation issue which was creating a trouble for the company, and they could not even sell 10% of the total forecasted value, right. So, what is this implementation we are talking about? Implementation of business marketing strategy. Now, many marketing plans fail just because they are poorly implemented. You may have a very great strategy, you may have a great idea, but because you are not able to implement it properly, you are failing in the market, right. Maybe sometimes the company lacks that energy, that that aggressiveness. Sometimes the company feels that they have not targeted the right markets. Okay, it could be anything, right. So, what is marketing implementation? It is the process that translates marketing plans into actions, right, and ensures that such actions or assignments are executed in a manner that accomplishes the defined objectives. So, these are the plans which, when you execute in the market, it helps you to achieve your objectives and your target. Okay. When both strategy and implementation are appropriate, a company achieves excellent performance, right, excellent results. Okay. So, let us look at this small picture. The source is Thomas V. Bonoma, his article from where we have collected. He says marketing implementation taken on the y axis, and x axis you take the strategy. So, marketing implementation can be poor or excellent. Similarly, strategy can be appropriate or inappropriate, right, or you can say, if not appropriate, inappropriate, not so appropriate, you can say appropriate and not so appropriate, right. Now, if the implementation is excellent, if the strategy is appropriate and the implementation is excellent, so it is a case of success, right. So, it targets for growth, share, profits are met, so it is a fine, no issues. So, this is a good case. Suppose the strategy is not so appropriate or inappropriate and the marketing implementation is poor, this case. So, it is a clear case of failure, right, you are failing on both sides. So, case of failure is hard to diagnose because poor strategy is masked by the inability to execute. So, what actually is the reason we do not know? It could be people sometimes feel it was due to poor implementation, it was due to the poor strategy. What was wrong? It is difficult to understand, but then the case is, it is a case of failure, the product has failed. Anyway, these are two very clear cut cases. But what about these other two? Let us see. When the strategy is appropriate, but the implementation is not good, right. So, this is where the author says this is a case of trouble, right. Poor execution, right, hampers appropriate strategy. Management may conclude that its strategy is inappropriate. So, here you are into a trouble, the company is into a trouble because the strategy is good, but the implementation is not being done well. So, it spends it, you waste your time, your money, your other resources, which is, it extends your break even point to a very large duration or large number of units, because you are not doing things correctly. Okay. So, you are taking more time than what you should be to achieve success. Now, look at the other case, when the strategy is not so appropriate and the implementation is good. So, you have very agile managers, very good managers who are frontline workers who are doing excellent in their job, but the strategy led by the company is somewhere not so appropriate, right. Maybe according to the time, maybe according to the kind of the competition in the market or anything, right. So, in this case it says, the author says rescue or ruin, right. So, what does it mean by saying rescue or ruin? I will explain. Good execution may mitigate poor strategy, right. If your execution is good, it can reduce the effect of a bad strategy or poor strategy and give management the time to correct it. Okay. But remember, it may also hasten failure. That means, if you have a good strategy and suppose let us say both are minus, then the fall also will be very fast. At least if one of them is plus, let us say appropriation, your implementation is plus, your strategy is inappropriate. So, in this case what is happening, at least the fall is, it is taking time to fall and you can correct your mistakes. But if both are, the absolute value is very high, the inappropriateness of the failure or the strategy is very high or the strategy is very bad and you are also working at a very excellent speed. So, in that case what happens, it is not about managing excellently, it is not, please do not understand it managing excellently. What happens is, you are trying to fasten or expedite or speed up the failure, which makes it a bigger or faster failure case. That means, you now the company will take less time to fail just because you have executed it very fast. Okay. So, that poor strategy is exposed clearly. Okay. So, when strategy is inappropriate but implementation is poor or vice versa, diagnosis becomes tricky. Poor marketing execution may cause management to doubt even sound strategies because they are masked by the implementation inadequacies. Okay. So, which we said, which we are talking about the troubled case. Okay. But if the other case, as I said, is the ruin or rescue or ruin case, what is happening? When strategy is inappropriate and execution excellent, right, that is the case where we are discussing. Management usually gets the time to recognize the mistake and correct it, but at some time, other times, good execution, as I repeat again, of bad strategy acts as the engine, like a plane which is crashing. So, it fasten the, it expedites the crashing, right. So, it makes it faster to crash. So, this is a case where it talks about how do you then implement your strategy. Be very careful on how you execute your strategy and how you build your strategy. Okay. Now, the question is, strategy building generally happens to be at the top management's decision, right? But the question is, implementation is not the top management, it's about everybody implementing it, and largely it is being implemented at the SBUs, the different frontline people, the frontline managers and all. So how do they implement it? Is the strategy properly understood by them? Have they got an idea of what actually the top management is thinking, or there is a communication gap between the two? So how would you implement? The implementation will depend also on how much the understanding about the strategy is there, right? And after that, there are other points also, like for example the skill set and all things, right? So there are four important skills that can help a manager in effective implementation. What are they? First, interaction. Interacting, allocating, monitoring and organizing. So what does it mean by saying interacting? For example, marketing managers are continuously interacting with others both within and outside the corporation. So as we say, internal marketing, right? Your own people should be able to understand what you are doing, right? The job of a top management is to explain the strategies, explain the objectives of the company very lucidly, very clearly to the frontline workers, right? Because otherwise what will happen is there will be a communication gap. Inside, the marketing manager deals with peers such as production, R&D, So you must have heard about concepts like concurrent engineering, where companies have found out that it is important that there is a team of people who work together, right? When people are working in isolation, right, in silos, for example, finance department works differently, production differently, marketing differently, they may achieve individual success, but the overall, if you see, the company might fail, right? So it was seen that this kind of concept has will not work if people are working in isolation. So a work is more important. So the concept of concurrent engineering came up, for example, in Ford long back, where they thought if the vehicle is failing, why it is failing. So for that, not only the production team is responsible, there has to be a guy from marketing, there has to be a guy from finance, there has to be a guy from quality control, everyone, so that each of them try to put in their ideas. Okay. Similarly, you must have heard about quality circles and all, right? So companies are encouraging such kind of interaction, companies are encouraging some kind of discussion, so that there is no communication gap. Okay. It has been observed that managers who have the ability to understand how others feel and have good bargaining skills are the best implementers. Yeah, that is generally, you see, it's an individual skill which can be developed, but sometimes it is also inborn, right? Some leaders are generally good. They are very, they are very democratic in nature. They feel for others, and whereas some others might not be. And both have the rate of success and failure, right? It's not that people who are autocratic have always failed and who are democratic have always been successful. It's nothing like that. How you implement, that is very important. What condition you are in and how you implement it. So it is seen that the managers who are not so able, say they allocate too many resources to the mature programs and too few to the new and riskier programs, because they feel there is a chance of failure, right? But actually it's not that it's not the right way. So it depends on how you execute, how you allocate your resources. The third thing that is important is monitoring. Now it's only by using the right monitoring skills that marketing information and control systems can be effectively utilized. So good implementers struggle and with their market and businesses until they can simply and powerfully express the necessary conditions. For example, ratios and the conditions which are required to understand whether the business is doing well or not. For example, whether the profitability is necessarily high or not, is the company achieving the break even in the right time or not, is the market share growing or not. So the company has to continuously check these things, right? Now poor implementation either follows the industry norms mindlessly, or they get lost in fancy. So sometimes you start loving your ideas, or you just follow somebody and you land into a trouble, right? So this is not the way thing is to be done. So continuous monitoring is to be done, so that you are always ready with, in your understanding, that what is going wrong or what is going correct, right? If something is going wrong, then you have the time to correct it. Okay. Last thing is organizing. So, sound execution often hinges on the marketer's ability to work with both the format and the formal and the informal organizational network. So, every company has a formal and an informal network. So, how do you handle it, right? For example, how do you deal with the suppliers? How do you deal with the internal employees? Okay, how do you manage them, right? How do you manage your advertising agencies? How do you manage your anybody who is attached to the company? How do you manage them, right? So, it is very important. Good implementers have an almost good ability to create fresh informal organization or network to match the problem which they are facing. Okay. So, how do you deal with these issues is very important. How do you organize, what kind of organizing abilities you have is very important. Now, after you have understood the implementations, now we will talk about the marketing control. Now, what is control, marketing control? So, after formulating and implementing the strategy and the plan, the next step is to control the performance. So, whether your performance is in the right way or wrong way, so that has to be checked. So, strategic control, annual plan control, efficiency and effectiveness control and profitability control. So, 4 ways we can explain the marketing control. So, let us look through a very lucid way which has been picked up from the Kotler's book. So, it says level of control can be 4. Primary, what is their primary responsibility, what is the purpose of control and what are the tools used. Okay. Now, first is strategic control. Strategic control is the primary responsibilities of the top management. Okay. Now, what is the purpose? To examine whether the company is pursuing its best opportunities with respect to the market, product or channels. And how do you check that? What is the tool to find out? Through the marketing audits. Now, this is very important because if you are not utilizing the best opportunities, right, with respect to market, product or channels or anything, then you are missing out on the opportunity, right. So, this is the strategy control and top management is responsible. Then you have the annual plan control where the top and the middle management is responsible. What is the purpose here? To examine whether the planned results are being achieved. So, whatever we had forecasted, whatever we have thought of, are we achieving it or not? Okay. How do you measure that? What are the tools? The sales analysis, market share analysis, expense to sales ratios, other some kind of ratios, attitude tracking of the people and the employees and all. The third level of control is efficiency and effectiveness. Now, who is responsible? The middle management. Now, what is the purpose? To examine how the resources have been utilized in each element of the marketing strategy to accomplish a goal. Now, what it says? Now, how has the resources been utilized, right? Now, that has to be tracked and monitored. Okay. So, what are the tools to check that? Expense ratios, advertising effectiveness measures, market potential, contribution margin analysis. So, few tools, right. And the last is the profitability control. So, the marketing controller or the marketing guy, he is responsible here. What is the purpose? To examine where the company is making or losing money. Now, this is very important because one has to be very clear where exactly you are gaining money and where you are losing out your money, right. If not done, even great companies can face difficulties. For example, I told you about the Nano case, right, a case where the company has bled a lot, right. So, what is the tools? Profitability by product territory, right, market segment, trade channel, order size. So, these are some kind of profitability control measures or tools which can be helpful to measure it, right. So, this, if one can understand this slide, it is a very nice way it has been depicted how the control mechanism is to be checked in companies. Now, marketing control process. So, when we are talking about the marketing control process, what are the steps? Now, set the performance standards first. So, the company, in order to have a control process, the first thing that it has to do is to set the performance standard. Now, then measure the actual performance, right. Compare the actual performance with the standards. Find the reason for the deviation. Now, if it is doing well, then why? If it is not doing well, then why not? Okay. Find the reason for the deviation. Sometimes, interestingly, companies have been able to find out new markets just by understanding that the actual performance was much higher than the forecasted performance, right. Now, why is that? Now, because in actuality they have targeted to more number of segments which in during forecasting they had not even thought of, right. So, this kind of situation, for example, a company who wants to make vaccines for a particular kind of, let us say, disease, finds that that same vaccine is useful for other diseases also, or a medicine, let us say. Now, that is a new segment altogether. So, here the actual performance has increased over the forecasted one, but on the other case, most of the cases the actual performance might be lesser than the forecasted performance. Then the question is why it is not matching to that. Find the reasons for the deviation, why it is deviating, why it is not, why we are not able to match it, okay, and then take the corrective action. So, these 5 steps, with this we can control, the marketer can control the process and try to bring back the the thing to track, okay. So, if the deviation has happened, bring it back to normalcy and let the process move on, okay. So, this is what we have understood today. So, we have understood that in management, in any marketing perspective, implementation strategy, implementation and control are 3 important steps, right. And if they are done together all correctly, then a company cannot fail, in a big way. If it's if it gets some kind of initial failure also, then it can take corrective actions and then come back to track and profitability. So, with this I would like to wind up today's lecture, and thank you very much. Take care. Bye bye.